Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei were the 5 children of the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, and his wife, Alexandra Feodrovna. The entire family was tragically wiped out by the Bolsheviks during the First World War after they were imprisoned for a little over a year. In this 5-part series, we will reflect all of their lives separately each Wednesday. As we look at them individually, I will rather uncover their personality and accomplishments rather than making these 5 videos a biography of them, in order to prevent repeating myself as the siblings spent their entire life together. However, to make every part understandable for all viewers, there might be some repeating, which I will minimize as much as possible. Before we jump into the video, I wanted to mention that I now also have a Patreon site where you can further support my work if you like to do so. There will be a link in the description box. You will get exclusive behind-the-scenes footage, unposted material, and much more. Grand Duchess Olga was the first child to her parents, the last Tsar Nicholas II, and his wife Alexandra Feodrovna. She was born on November 15, 1895, after a difficult delivery in which the responsible doctor lastly had to use a forceps to deliver Olga, who weighed 4.5 kilograms. Her parents, Nicholas and Alexandra, mentioned on a few occasions that they weren't disappointed that Olga was a girl. Nicholas stated, "I am glad that our child is a girl. Had it been a boy, he would have belonged to the people. Being a girl, she belongs to us." In 1896, Nicholas and Alexandra took Olga with them on their travels to Europe. On this occasion, Olga met her great-grandmother and godmother, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, at Balmoral Castle. The Queen wrote after meeting her great-granddaughter, "The baby is magnificent." The family's travel continued to France, where they were welcomed by crowds that shouted, "Vive la bébé!" Within her family, Olga was known as Olishka, Olenka, or Olya. She loved both of her parents dearly, but she always was Daddy's little girl. She idolized her father, Nicholas II, and often wore a necklace with an icon of St. Nicholas. She was also especially close to her paternal aunt, Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna, whom she adored. The relationship with her mother is described as strained. That could be because Nicholas paid closer attention to all of the children, as Alexandra was often too sick to look after them. Growing up, Olga was famous for her quick temper and moodiness, which often led to conflicts with her mother. As a young girl, she once told a portrait painter, "You are a very ugly man, and I don't like you one bit." She would often receive notices from her mother, learning her to be polite to the people at court. Olga would grow up to become an extremely kind and highly intelligent young woman. She loved studying, probably because it was easy to memorize everything for her. She was especially interested in politics and read the newspaper daily. Olga was also the musician within her family and played the piano skillfully. Alexandra was very strict with Olga, as she was the eldest of the siblings, and she expected the young Grand Duchess to always act appropriately and to be an idol to her siblings. One letter Olga received from her mother said, "Remember above all to always be a good example to the little ones." By other family members, Alexandra's expectations are described as unreasonable for young Olga, who just wanted to enjoy her childhood. Alexandra would also often blame Olga for her younger brother Alexei's inappropriate behavior, despite Olga being the closest one to Alexei in the family. Olga is remembered as a beautiful young and elegant lady. She had chestnut blonde hair and deep blue eyes. She was above medium height at around 165 centimeters and quite slim. Her nose was upturned and she had a bright smile with beautiful teeth. Being the eldest of the 5 siblings might have also laid the foundation for a generous and social attitude. Olga was keen on helping others. While she herself was still a child, she was driving through the streets with her family when she saw a little girl crying on the road. Olga, without hesitation, threw out her doll to the crying little girl and said, "Don't cry, little girl. Here's a doll for you." When she turned 20, she took over control of a portion of her fortune and personally started responding to charity requests. On one occasion, when she was out for a ride, she saw a young child using crutches. She stopped the carriage to ask about the child and learned that its parents were too poor to afford the treatment. She set aside an allowance to cover all the medical bills. A court official described Olga's character as angelic. As Olga slowly got of age of marriage, her possible future husbands were widely discussed. Some men considered for Olga were George, Crown Prince of Serbia, Prince Boris of Bulgaria, Edward, Prince of Wales, or Prince Carol of Romania. Olga was a patriot and refused to give up her nationality and leave Russia for any man. That is why all marriage prospects were rejected. Her father had promised Olga that he would never force her to marry anyone she didn't want to. Olga and her other sisters were always surrounded by the guards, and in late 1913, Olga fell in love with one of them, Pavel Voronov. He was her first love, but she knew that she could never marry him. Back when Olga was 15, she and her sister Tatiana visited the opera house in Kiev with her father. Sadly, they were witnesses to the assassination on Pyotr Stolypin, the then government minister. This event left both sisters deeply traumatized. Both would later be trained to be Red Cross nurses and started treating wounded soldiers during World War I together with their mother Alexandra. While serving in the hospital, the sisters, who until then lived sheltered from the outside world, were amazed to meet other people. They enjoyed talking to soldiers and knew all of their family's stories. Olga firstly enjoyed the work in the hospital, but over the time she got increasingly sensitive after seeing so many wounded and also dying men. Because of this, she was assigned for office work in the hospital and had to be treated with arsenic injections. At the hospital, Olga met her second love, a wounded soldier named Dmitry Chakbagov. She would often talk to him on the phone and was depressed when he left the hospital. But of course there was no hope for their love, as it was inappropriate for a Grand Duchess to marry a commoner. During World War I, Olga was well aware of the political situation Russia was in. She knew that both her parents were extremely unpopular. According to one source, Olga understood the situation her family was in more than any other family member. The revolution that broke out in Russia and lastly forced her father to abdicate confirmed all of her thoughts. In that moment, Olga changed completely. All of her bright spirits disappeared. Following the revolution, Olga and her family were arrested and held imprisoned at Tsarskoye Selo. In one letter to a friend of hers, she wrote, "Darling, you must know how awful all of it is." Olga was the one who tried to encourage her family to keep faith, despite her own mental health getting worse from month to month. She started writing poems while under house arrest. Some of the poems underlined how she felt about the situation they were in. In one she wrote, "Father asks to remember that the evil which is now in the world will become yet more powerful, and that it is not evil which conquers evil, but only love." There is one report that says that Olga had received a small revolver from her father, which she hid in a boot while under house arrest. But one of the jailers pleaded with Olga to surrender her revolver before being moved from Tobolsk to Yekaterinburg in spring 1918 after a year of captivity. Late in the night of July 16, 1918, the family was awoken and taken to the basement. After being left in the room for half an hour, the chief executioner named Yakov Yurovsky entered the room and demanded the family to stand up as he read their death sentences. Olga reportedly attempted to make the sign of the cross before the shooting began. After the first gun hail, Olga and all of her siblings were still alive. Olga and Tatiana crouched against the room's rear wall, clinging to each other and screaming to their mother, who was already dead at that time. One of the guards approached the sisters with a bayonet but failed to wound them due to the jewels they had sewn into their tops. While still holding each other, Tatiana was shot in the back of her head by Yurovsky. Only a few moments later, Olga died after a shot into her jaw. As the bodies of the family were buried in the nearby woods, they were not found for the next few decades. This left room for impostors that claimed to be one of the members of the Romanov family. One impostor named Marga Boots claimed that she was Grand Duchess Olga. Some of the remaining family members believed her, while others didn't. After they discovered and identified all of the bodies, almost 80 years later, it was proved that Olga was killed with her family. In 2000, Olga and her family were canonized as passion bearers by the Russian Orthodox Church. Earlier, in 1981, they were canonized as holy martyrs by the Russian Orthodox Church abroad. They were buried on July 17, 1998, at the St. Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg.